Good morning, London, and good morning from Canary Wharf. My name is George Sebastião, CEO of GBO, Global Blockchain Organization, also co-founder of EcoEsks. We recently held a London event, which is extremely successful about building ecosystem. It's a pleasure to be with you here again today in this great meeting of many minds and thought leaders to discuss both Metaverse, Web 3.0, blockchain, and all the new technologies combined together to bring the latest, but with a little bit of safety, which is really the topic of my thought today. So let me show you some slides. I have only a few. So I'll be talking primarily about the safety, privacy, and cyber risks associated with running in this new environment of Metaverse, Web 3.0, and all new technologies associated with blockchain and digital payments as well. When we talk primarily about privacy and protection of cybersecurity in modern environments, because we're connected to the internet with extremely high bandwidth broadband speeds, it's really about the importance of speed, because today your most valuable asset is your data. So the more speed you have in terms of connectivity, the more data can be siphoned from your own organizations, from your digital or virtual twin environments. And as a result, the faster that you respond to the cyber attacks on a 24/7 basis, the quicker you'll be able to protect yourselves in a much better way. There's an element of this we sometimes refer to as time-based security, in which we say that the time of protection should always be greater than the time of detection or reaction. So what is really important is primarily the detection and the reaction time, so that you respond in time to cyber attacks. When we talk about the metaverse and the Web 3.0, there's really many elements that come together. And the people that put it better than anybody is always the Gartner Group as a thought leader and experts in the field. In this metaverse environment, we combine many elements. We combine the elements of digital twin technology or immersive environments, digital currencies, e-commerce, social media, artificial intelligence with natural language processing, gamification, and primarily also the presence of digital assets such as tokens, or sometimes referred as token economy, but also more popular today, also NFTs, also known as non-fungible tokens. All of these elements come together to create a very comprehensive environment or ecosystem, or you can say economy that works all together. However, with this new environment comes a lot of risks. So let's take an example of some of these risks. Many of you have looked about OpenSea before. OpenSea is the most popular platform in which NFTs can be minted and sold. However, one of the OpenSea's key elements, which is the Discord server, got hacked and was promoting basically scam NFTs. As a result, this can create failure in the credibility and the trust and that exists actually in the environment. So it's not just about protecting one element, but it's actually about protecting all the elements. All these elements that we have today in Web 3.0 require a blockchain element. Blockchain has some good points, but also some bad points. Some points today associated with blockchain is its capacity to actually process a high volume number of transactions. So most blockchains can only perform a limited number. So as a result, when Bored Apes Yacht Club launched on the Ethereum platform, basically, Ethereum platform was not capable to handle the volume associated with the transactions being put through. As a result, Ethereum crashed, and also the number of transactions per second and the cost of minting fees went extremely high as well. This has happened not just the first time, but other times in the past as well. For those that remember, over 5 years ago, when NFTs got introduced with something known as CryptoKitties, something very similar also happened as well. So we need to have blockchains that actually enable high throughputs environments so that we don't end up with what we call a denial of service condition that results in not being able to perform transactions. We're creating a new e-commerce trusted environment that allows this level of scalability. However, when we talk about Web 3.0 and Metaverse, the kind of risk factors that come to play are many. One is the complexity of the environment. We already talked about scams. Of course, there's a whole new generation of APIs that come into play, and all those APIs are not always mature, so therefore they have vulnerabilities. So they need to be tested, they need to be audited. One of the key elements that exists in today's environment is the presence of smart contracts. So these are contracts that administer the digital assets. So their code, and as any code has vulnerabilities associated with them, they must be audited, sometimes not just by one auditing company, but by more than one to ensure that they're actually safe. Other elements of the ecosystem include things like wallets. Wallets can have risks, so do have exchanges, etc. One of the key elements that is always the highest risk is always the end user. So one of the things that we need to always focus is on building the necessary end user awareness. So training is an important element in the deployment of safety of Web 3.0 and Metaverse. So as we move to Web 3.0 and Metaverse, securing this new environment with higher degrees of complexity and a whole new set of sometimes not so mature technology, we need to ensure that this safety comes along with us. So that means we need to have the necessary frameworks. We need to have the necessary risk and audit assessments to ensure that the environment is completely safe. And I'll discuss that towards the end of my presentation. The biggest element is always the presence of large amounts of data. So when we talk about the new web, really the data is not just numbers and digits. It's about video, it's about audio, it's about 3D elements. So the data space is much larger. Because this data space is much larger, the risks are higher and it's much more difficult to protect. So we should always focus to protect this element of data. The good thing is that most blockchain technologies that exist today are based on the PKI elements of cybersecurity that have been with us for a long time. So the technology is sound, but it needs to be architectured and implemented correctly so that the safety is end-to-end in the entire application. So what are some of the other risk factors? We have multi-protocols in the blockchain. We have different blockchains. And the bridge between these blockchains, or what we call multi-chain bridges, is actually one of the areas of big concern. One of the popular gaming platforms known as Axie Infinity saw about 650 million, not billion, siphoned from their environment as a result through the Ronin bridge. This is not the only case where bridges have been attacked. Actually, we have lost over $1 billion of assets through the vulnerabilities that exist between these multi-asset bridges or multi-chain bridges. So this is one of the areas that we need to focus on to add a lot more extra safety as we move towards a better Web 3.0 multiverse environment. What about exchanges? Well, exchanges are a big risk for us. If we look at this quite popular exchange in Canada known as Quadriga CX, which existed for quite a number of years, about 5 years. As a result, the CEO disappeared and there was no proper disaster recovery. So the entire assets of the exchange got lost as a result, almost $200 million. So we need to ensure that we have the proper processes and auditing mechanisms to ensure that exchanges themselves are also safe as well. One of the key elements that we use for identity in these new web environments is associated with our mobile phone. We use things like the SIM card, the SMSs to provide multi-factor authentication. However, this multi-factor authentication has been broken for quite some time. One of the most famous attacks that exists is known as SIM swap, in which somebody takes over your SIM card and as a result can take over your entire digital environment. This is a very high risk, especially when you have potentially millions of dollars in assets in your digital wallet. So the element of the ecosystem, in this case, the telecom operator, needs to also be part of the safety on the equation of the Web 3.0 and the multiverse environments. The kind of crime that exists already on the traditional web is also moving to the metaverse and Web 3.0. So we have people stalking, we have bad behavior happening in these new environments. So as a result, we need to add procedures that enable this metaverse to also be safe. One example, Facebook and their metaverse environment introduced a safety ring in which people cannot come to you, close to you within the metaverse environment. It's almost like a circle of protection or a ring fence to protect yourselves. The other thing that is important is, where do we actually use all this metaverse environment? Which devices do we prefer? Most of the times this gets done through a popular browser like Chrome or Brave or others. As a result, these browsers, although are safe, the extensions that we tend to install on these browsers are not necessarily safe. We have found that hundreds of these exchanges leak information. And as a result, this leakage can result in higher risks. We have one example that also existed, very similar. As you know, MetaMask is actually a browser extension. Itself was not 100% safe because backups were being done through iCloud. The passwords associated with MetaMask were also being backed in iCloud. So as a result, anybody who had access to that iCloud would have full access to your digital assets as well. Some of these issues have been fixed more recently, but we need to always be aware of the risks as they come. As I mentioned before, exchanges are not safe. Exchanges are places where we trade these digital assets. So you should keep these digital assets for the minimal amount of time possible in these exchanges, and then move them to safer places. Some of these safer places is what we call warm or cold wallets. But one expects those to actually be safe. But in reality, even cold wallets can actually not be safe 100%. And here we have an example of one of the popular cold wallets, Ledger Nano, that had some safety issues. And as a result, they needed to update the software of this cold wallet, known also as the firmware. Anytime there is hardware, there's also software that helps you run this hardware. And if there's vulnerabilities in this case, it was a capability of doing what we call a man-in-the-middle attack, when the keys were being passed between the desktop or between the mobile phone and the cold wallet device. So as a result, we need to make sure that all these safeties get updated on a regular basis. All of these elements that I described to you so far is really about managing and controlling risk. So what do you find, or what do you consider to be the acceptable risk? This acceptable risk really depends on the level of assets that you have today and you manage. So if you manage a few $100s worth of digital assets, you expect a certain amount of acceptable risk. If you manage, however, institutional money like millions or billions, then you need to put much more mature controls. The good news is that the frameworks to create these maturity controls for both blockchain as well as the metaverse already exist today. We have the Government Blockchain Association, or GBA, out of Washington, D.C., that has created the Blockchain Maturity Index. And we have the XRSI.org, which has actually created also a framework that also helps us manage risk in the context of XR, or extended reality environments, or what we sometimes refer to as immersive environments. And here, what is important is the level of risk depends on the applications that you use. So if you use for simple digital assets trading is one thing, or for playing a game is another. If, however, you're using these immersive environments for something like, for example, medical procedures, then you're talking about patient data. So there's a whole series of other controls associated with the protection of patient data, like HIPAA, that also need to be taken into account. And the framework actually ensures that all of these get handled, not just from the back end of the blockchain and the immersive environment, but also from the front-end devices like the Oculus and those that enable you to visualize those extended or mixed reality environments. So a few final words. How do you ensure that you create safety in this new metaverse Web 3.0? It's almost like you're going into a new kind of fight. And this fight is what we sometimes call a gunfight. And in a gunfight, you don't bring a knife, although it will be what we call outgunned. So it's important to bring a gun or to bring all your friends that have guns. What it really means is that we have to be much better at sharing information about cyber attacks in this new world, being able to improve the flexibility and safety of these new e-commerce environments that we're trying to create both in the metaverse and the Web 3.0. And this will result in a much better implementation of trust. So disruption is ahead with us, as some of the other presenters will be with you today, but we have to do this in a safe and trusted environment. So I hope you actually enjoy your day today. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to join some of these questions with us. So I hope you enjoy your remaining of the day at the Canary Wharf, and looking forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.